Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, March the 12th. Welcome to our video commentary. Well, you may have heard that they're having elections in Cuba. It's a travesty. It's not an election by any means. But of course, all of this is tied into the announcement that Raul Castro made last year that he was retiring in 2018, and several other members of what they call the older generation, or the people who came to power with the Castros. Many of them are retiring as well. So there's kind of a generational change in that sense. That is true. But it's not an election, because what you basically had was a one-party state. It's still a one-party state. You get to run within a political party. You have to carry the party line. You don't really have platform differences between the candidates. It's not like you have one political party versus another political party. You don't have any of that. It's a one party, it's all within the same party. It's basically the Cuban Communist Party choosing members for the Cuban Communist Party, but they call it an assembly because obviously they have to engage in a little bit of corruption of the language. But it's not an election by any means. Now, the man who looks like he will be the next leader of Cuba, at least on paper, is a fellow named Miguel Diaz-Canel. He was born in, I believe, 62 in Cuba. He's an engineer by training. He went to the Soviet Union, I think, to get his degree. He was a college professor at one time, and then eventually got into the political system, went through the party, earned the loyalty of Raul Castro, and he's the one who will be very likely the new leader of Cuba. But of course, there's two problems with all of this. The first problem, as I mentioned a minute ago, this was not an election. There was no real change here. There was no real contrast. There was no real choice. You're basically choosing between two people who want to keep things the way they are. So it's kind of a personality contest, you might say, between this guy and this guy. They both say the same thing. They both agree on 99% of the important things, but, they may, one guy may be more charismatic than the other, but at the end of the day, you're not really giving people a choice. That's the first problem. The second problem is the Cuban economy continues to be a mess. And it's a mess because the so-called economic reforms that have been implemented have not really worked, because it's very difficult to reform a country like Cuba, where basically the government runs everything, and the government has created all of these relationships with foreign companies and so on. And then on top of that, of course, the Cuban economy is not a real economy in the sense that people work and produce anything. So it's going to be very difficult for this new person who's going to take over. His name is Miguel Diaz-Canel. It's going to be very difficult for him to run Cuba, I think. And I think you're going to see some real struggles eventually between the different people in the communist dictatorship, and we'll see what happens. I just think it's going to be very difficult. There's also great disenchantment. This is a key point here. Great disenchantment in the young people against the Castro regime. I mean, there's just tremendous disenchantment. People are sick and tired of not having freedom and so on. So keep an eye on Cuba. I don't think this is the last change that you're going to see. Raul Castro is apparently going to retire. He may not, but he won't be around. They'll put it that way. Some of the older generation will be retiring. That probably will happen. But keep an eye on Cuba. I just think that there's some big things that could be happening here in the next 12 to 18 months as the Cuban people begin to demand a lot more of what has been denied to them for quite some time. You never know. You never know. It's going to be interesting down in Cuba. We'll do some shows about this, I'm sure, over the next few months in our podcast. Have a great day, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas. Beautiful day here. Looks like spring is almost here. You can watch all of these videos over at YouTube. We also have them on Twitter, and we also have them on my blog. Bye-bye, everybody.